Hi, welcome everyone to Plein Air Easton 2022. We're inside the Armory building in downtown Easton once again, and we're bringing you Beyond the Canvas today here from the Armory in downtown Easton. Please, if you, this is one of our last broadcasts. The painters will start bringing their paintings in. Everything will be in here by Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Please stop in to the Academy Art Museum across the street from us and at least check out that exhibit. It is a beautiful testimony to the area. I don't know if it's the wrong word, testimony, but it's a beautiful mosaic of the area, probably still the wrong word. And that will be over at the Academy Art Museum, and there will be plenty of paintings over in for you to see as well in the Armory here. So please stop by this weekend. If you will not regret it. Today this is our graduated from Coffee and Conversations to Half Calf and a Shot of Cane to Beyond the Canvas. And our artists today, our alumna artists, Georganna Lenssen, Garin Baker, and Robert Simone. Thank you guys very much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Just real quick, we just want to say who you are, where you're from. I already said your names. Where you're from and that sort of thing. Georganna, we'll go to ladies first until that doesn't matter anymore.
I'm from Honeybrook, Pennsylvania, and I went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and I'm a studio and plein air painter.
Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Is that right? Okay.
Wow.
Garin?
Awesome.
Born and raised New York City, Art Students League, primarily early art education, and now I reside in the beautiful Lower Hudson Valley in New Windsor, New York.
Okay, great. And
Born and
Robert.
raised in Cleveland, Ohio area, and I've lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, the last 40 years, west coast of Florida, and it's almost as good as Easton.
right, well, that's the right thing to say. That's the right thing to say. Again, as we said, this conversation, as we get developed, hopefully will be a conversation amongst the artists. We're talking today about developing a style. I don't know if that's a broad question or a very specific question, but could you guys talk about style a little bit in painting?
I don't think you can really help your style if you, it's sort of like your handwriting, if you are authentic with what you do, you really can't help what comes out. It's not like I don't feel like you nurture a style. Do you?
Probably not. I think you can move in certain directions, and over a period of time cultivate certain attributes in your work, but it's still a product of who you are, the way you express yourself through the principles of painting, right? Another artist, John Brandon Sills, the other day said his version was you want to paint like who you are until you get rid of who you are.
Right.
And then your style will be there. So I thought that was pretty good.
I think that that word style is kind of a double-edged sword, because I think it sort of it should be something that comes out innately in you, just like you were saying, like a signature. But when you sort of find that sort of signature style, it can be a dangerous thing as well. Because if your work, finding that particular style, becomes very popular, and you're sort of then in a position to either have to continually repeat that style, and so it can be stifling in a way to find that signature style and then have it only be your only hook in a sense. I sort of look at an artist's work over the course of their life like an arc, and really to tell the story of an artist's life through their style, through their work, and through the kinds of things that they want to push through. So if they find a style or they create a particular language, then they're always looking to push through that to get to the next phase of what they're really trying to communicate. So I agree with you, the style should be innate and it should come out, but it shouldn't be something that you're always, in a sense, that's my style, that's all I can really repeat. Because I notice sometimes with artists' careers, they stay with one sort of approach, one technique, one style in a sense, and it can be a little bit of a safe cushion a little bit.
Okay, but one thing is, I said it's innate, and when I teach, I always try to find a student's particular bent and make that work for them. But when I work, I don't have a particular technique. I never use the same palette. I never approach the painting the same way. Sometimes I usually use transparencies, but not always, because I always want to keep myself off balance. So I'm continually challenging myself in that kind of a way. So I never fall into any pattern because I never let myself get slack with it.
Right, right.
Yeah, because like you were saying, you could get pigeonholed.
You can, and
And-
you can also, it can be from exterior, the audience outside of you, sort of always expecting the kind of the same thing, or it can be from yourself in a sense that, wow, that thing I stumbled upon, that technique or that look, is really popular. So I got to sort of continue to do that rather than challenging yourself, like you're saying, with always working slightly a little bit different, always changing up your approach slightly so that you're always pushing the envelope creatively so you can get to really what I call a more inner truth about the work that you're trying to communicate at the end of the day. And obviously your life as an artist, you know, you go different places, you experience different things, and the work should, in my opinion, should really be about that. It should really be about the experience and the narratives of your life throughout that arc of your life. And you notice, like, you know, let's just say somebody, you know, like somebody like Picasso, just because everyone knows who that is.
Okay.
You know, early on, it was very, very academic, very figurative, and then things changed. You know, he changed, the world around him changed, he went into different periods. So when you look at a Picasso, or you could choose any artist, you see their work evolving and developing and growing into different areas, and it's not as though there's one style that is pervasive throughout their entire life.
Think about Stuart Shills and how, do you know who Stuart Shills is?
I don't. No.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's someone for you to look up, some homework.
Yeah.
But he is an amazing painter, and he had an amazing career, and he still does, but he's completely switched from painting to making these three-dimensional objects, and he's carrying where he's very authentic to what he wants to do, not what the public wants. And he's making these fascinating things, and I so admire that because he lets the galleries go in favor of pursuing this thing he wants to pursue, which is really fascinating. It's just not the same thing he was doing before.
Right. Well, if you were to fall into sort of a recipe way of working and your subject matter is always the same and you do it the same way every time, you're stifling your own creativity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And what you're talking about is a way to make every work of art, whether it's painting, sculpture, or whatever you do, there's a certain amount of discovery in each one.
Yes.
Right.
And it's almost in a way like maybe building a jigsaw puzzle, but you're making the pieces as you
Right.
go. You know, you might have the image, the vision.
Well, I can't think of anything worse than, you know, the, what's that famous movie where the main character
It's
repeats
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
You know, I mean, if you were in your 20s or in your mid-20s or your early 30s and you found your style, and then by the time you're 80, you're basically repeating the same conversation over and over again, it just seems to me that whatever methods you're using, whatever medium you're working in, that your conversation should evolve just like your life evolves. To have the same conversation you have in your 20s that you have in your 50s would, to me, be kind of stilted and stunted in terms of your artistic growth. So this word style, and a lot of people, especially connoisseurs and collectors and people looking in at artists' work,
Yeah.
they use that word style as a way to say, oh, this artist has this style, this artist has this style. But from the artist out to the world, the artist is really not thinking about style. It's more something innate that comes out of every communication they have, and hopefully their communications, their ability to attach or their ability to go within, really, that's really what's important, is that an artist is trying to go within, inside, not necessarily outside, but to find the kind of heart and soul and humanity in their work that can communicate whatever style or with whatever manner they're trying to create.
Well,
with.
I guess that would be a question. When you say, and I totally understand what you're saying, when you say you're trying to go inside to bring out. And, but for me, what would be hard to understand is I'm looking at two paintings back here. One, we don't have any of Georganna's, and she's an abstract expressionist.
No, I'm not. Abstract
you
representation.
said-
Abstract representation.
Representation. That's right. Sorry. So her style, which is the wrong, her medium is totally different. But in looking at these paintings, how, if you're trying to get that inner self out, you talk inner thought or inner spirit or whatever, where does that come out in the boat or the profile of this gentleman here? I mean, how does it manifest itself onto the canvas? How does it get onto the canvas?
Look at the lighting for the portrait, the lighting, the way he's postured. I mean, he picks all that. And he sees something. I'm sorry, you talk. It's
No,
your
you can-
painting.
you're good.
I don't
You're
have a
good.
painting here, so
Well,
I have nothing to
I mean,
talk about.
for this portrait here, obviously I painted that from life. He's a wonderful model. His name is Mamadou, and he poses at the Art Students League. And he's from Senegal. And just the dignity in him, you know, the power and the dignity and quietness. There's a very interesting kind of quiet dignity to him. And so my job really is to, yes, with my style, yes, with my technique, yes, with what facilities and language, skill, drawing ability, proportional understanding, with all of those things as a traditional painter, as a representational painter, I'm trying to bring all of those language skills, that literacy skill, to find the truth. Because for me, in terms of what I'm after personally, and every artist is after something for themselves, but for what I'm after that, the thing about, there's something about beauty in truth. So I'm actually trying to get through him to his heart, through his surface persona, to the quiet kind of dignity and power that he conveys when you see him and when you meet him. There's a great painting, it's in the Metropolitan, it's painted by Velázquez. It's called Juan de Pareja. Now it's a small painting. It's no larger than maybe 30 inches, 32 inches across. And the entire room is full of huge Velázquez and Goya. The room is full of monumental paintings. But for some reason, Tim, when you walk into that room, that one painting, that small little portrait of Juan de Pareja that he did as Velázquez did as a practice painting on his way to paint the King of Spain. This was a practice painting, but there was a bolt of lightning that he caught, a truth in the humanity and character of that simple sitter that resonates. Now what, 600, 500 years later, that resonates. And when you walk into that room of monumental paintings, there is a crowd around that little small painting. And so he captured something of his soul and his spirit behind the eyes, not the literal eyes, but the soul behind the eyes. And when an artist is able to do that, when an artist is able to bottle that and then transfix it onto a canvas or onto a sculpture or an art form, a music, or a film for that matter, that work of art will last and transcend its moment in time and impact and affect generations to come. And so in a way, it's a high aspiration, it's a high mark to try to get at. It's not a normal or regular occurrence, I wish it was, but once in a while, out of 10 or 20 portraits, you nail something, you catch something. As a plein air painter, you capture the light, you bottle it, you snatch nature and transfix it on a piece of canvas. And when, of 100 paintings, there'll be 5 or 6 of them that are just like, wow, that's really an amazing piece of work. And I think beyond style, beyond technique, beyond mannerism, and beyond the methodology, that's, I think, what a lot of us, when you boil it down, are after. We're after that moment, that truth, that authenticity of spirit that we can snatch, in a sense.
The way I look at it, and if I glance up at your portrait, the thing that comes across to me is it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And when I work, I'm really seeking those characteristics and attributes of nature that, for whatever reason, when you put them together, they add up to something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a search for beauty. Now, when you talk about style, there are going to be things like maybe a manner of brushwork, your favorite tool that you manipulate paint with, whatever it is. That's probably going to come across to a certain degree over the course of your career.
Mm-hmm.
But if, like you said earlier, if you discovered your style when you were in your 20s, there was a famous artist they used to call the painter of light. I'm not going to remember his name. Well, he developed a certain style that he stuck with, and he did well.
He made a boatload
Oh,
of
you
money,
mean
too.
Thomas,
Made a lot of
Thomas
money.
Kincaid.
Yeah, and I don't mean to criticize him. I know from talking to a mutual friend of ours
Yeah.
that he planned that, right? And that was his plan. But because being an artist, a large part of it is developing an audience for your work, right? Your work is the star of the show. And if you're going to attract an audience, I think your work should be evolving and growing and changing and taking twists and turns to help keep your audience engaged, right? So, yeah, there's things that we're going to call style, but goes back to the idea of getting pigeonholed. If you just get,
Yeah.
I always use manganese blue for my skies, and I'm never changing that.
Yeah, the lantern at dusk.
Yeah. So it goes back to the idea that part of what makes us tick as artists, and I think also in other fields, in technology or whatever, an innate part of us is that we're creative. Even if it's someone who just loves cooking for their family in their home, and like my wife, she can make up a recipe sometimes. We can go to a good restaurant and we'll have a nice meal. She'll sort of decipher what's in there, and then she'll make it with her own twist at home from time to time. And therethere's a creativity in that,
Absolutely.
too. That's analogous
Well,
to
that
the
goes to the
creativity.
kind of like the next. I know, Georganna, I want to get to you real quick on this because there's a lot to unpack there. Those two answers, and we don't. If anybody's in the room and wants to look up Georganna's work on their phone, on Instagram, or just Google it, you could see when you're talking about bringing the inner sort of stuff out or whatever, inner,
Essence.
the soul, the essence or whatever. In your work, you're doing the same thing in a totally, it's just different way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I like to always try different things. A lot of times when I work with a subject, like if I work with flags, I'll make a flag and I'll spray paint it or I'll paint it and I'll cut it apart because I'm using it as a point of departure. So I don't just want to paint the flag, I want to kind of take it through different sensibilities. Or if I'm painting cakes, I'll make cakes out of paints and cardboard and spray paint and keep putting mediums together that aren't supposed to be together just to see what happens. And it's just a way of absorbing my subject. Or I'll make clay. I'm working on a project with windows. I'll make clay skyscrapers or mixed media skyscrapers just to watch how the light falls on it's so I don't become too cerebral about something and I get my hands involved and I just try to approach things, around go through the back door, I think, sometimes.
Okay.
It sounds like you do maybe a lot of experimentation.
I do.
And that keeps your work fresh.
Yeah, and I
And
do all
evolving.
different mediums, and but I'm not very good at them all. But I do them, and I don't care. It's fine. I just have fun because I think the creative play is so important,
Yeah.
and not producing a product, but working in your studio and just working and not worrying about whether something's going to happen. Because I make a lot of bad paintings, sure, but I mean, I'm fine with that because sometimes I make good ones. So it's, but
Yeah,
I have fun and I'm excited and I'm thrilled.
Well, that level of experimentation, allows you, I talk about this a lot to my students. A lot of us artists, we're perfectionists and we're afraid to make mistakes. But with that approach, which is really a commendable approach, that allows you to make lots of mistakes.
Or
That
maybe it even
allows you
thrives on the
to-
mistakes.
to depart from the fear element that this creative perfectionist process of being an artist, has a lot to do with. Being afraid to make a mistake, being afraid for it not to be right. And by experimenting and pushing the envelope, you're almost welcoming the mistakes.
I
You're
do.
almost welcoming the chances to happen. And through all of those amalgam or those mistakes, those chances, you actually push through and gain a lot more in the end than if you're overly cautious and overly careful to make that perfect painting.
But I think often the mistakes are what are exciting in a painting, and
Yeah.
I think it's developing the aesthetic to leave what is good, like the mistakes that are good. But I think I think I just lost my train of thought. I think that I welcome the mistakes, and I just I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well,
That's all right. That's okay.
The image or thought that ran through my head regarding that approach where it's experimental and you're trying this, trying that. If I compare that to the way I work, for me, a canvas is the playing field, okay? And I'm not opposed to calling an audible at the line of scrimmage, but you almost are disregarding the need for a playing field, and
Yes.
you're calling audibles constantly until something resonates deep within you, and you go, aha, this is
Yes,
my work.
because as I was saying to Tim earlier, what I had a critic a long time ago at the Academy, and he told me to go with my disposition, which is very chaotic. And I spend all my time in the studio, so something is going to come of it. But the thing is, if somebody gets too skillful, I think the work becomes much more interesting when they try something they're not used to and they actually struggle in the painting, and you can see that. And that's kind of more of a dialogue with the painting. What I was going to say before is I'll have my students do things. I'll have them listen to like a conversation. One of them went to Tangier Island, and the fishermen there speak with this dialect that you can barely
Right.
understand.
Yes.
Well, so I want them to listen to that and create a painting. Listen to something and create a painting. Create a painting off a piece of music. Let me give you a piece of literature. Make a painting. And
Yeah.
it's just constantly trying all these things to see how could I translate that into a painting.
All right. Now,
So it suits your personality, though.
Oh,
as-
absolutely.
As you said. And I think the way I work suits my personality, too.
Yeah.
I'm much more structured.
Yeah.
I had a very hard
Individual.
time learning how to paint. I really
Yeah.
did, and I was trained as a realist.
I'm still having a hard
I
time
am
learning
too.
how to
I am
paint.
too. But that's
Yeah.
why I welcome the mistakes, right?
right.
all
No, it's
hard.
great.
It's all
It all
hard.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I can understand everything you guys said. But we're going to take a break here in a second.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back and talk some more. So I'm going to take this at the beginning of the conversation that you three didn't have any styles, sort of, right? Because it's an evolving situation or whatever. But then I'm just hearing at the end, definitely a juxtaposition in your two ways you go about paintings. Are those styles?
No.
Okay.
Approaches.
We're going to get that answer when we come right back. This is Beyond the
I
Canvas.
like it. I like it.
Garin, Robert, and Georganna will be right back. One
right.
second. Welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Canvas inside of the Armory Building in Easton at Plein Air Easton 2022. This is our last roundtable discussion. So we want to pump up the volume on this last little section here and really get it going or whatever.
Right, so you saved the best for last.
This is the best for last.
Best for last.
We're with Garin Baker, Georganna Lenssen, and Robert Simone here, alumni. Is alumna or alumni? They've changed
plural.
spelling
It's
this
kinda-
year. So
Kind of weird here.
What are they?
It's plural, so it's alumni.
Alumni.
Alumni. They got
Alumni.
I've seen it done with an A, an AE, and an
It's the
I.
AE
now.
because it's plural.
Illuminati.
What's that?
Illuminati.
AE 'cause it's
We're an
plural.
Illuminati group.
A is plural, so
Yeah.
okay. So alum,
So-
and I pronounce it alumni. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Alumni.
Right.
So 3 alumni here, and we're talking about style, developing one, how you develop one, which turned out to be a really interesting answer, and that, you know, it's an exploration. We finished by kind of juxtaposing your guys' style, and I think, Georganna, you said it's not a style, it's an approach. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, as Garin was saying, I think that style is a double-edged work, just like what is your technique. And I think approach for me, works better.
Uh-huh.
I think those are vastly different between us, but I think style,
So
I
style
don't
was the
have a
wrong word.
style.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
style is one. As I said, it's one of those words for artists because for the artist, it kind of comes out innately. You can't control it. There are other things like technique. Technique you can teach. You know, the right tool, the handle the right way, the brush doing this way, strokes against the form, strokes with the form. You can teach a lot of techniques.
Uh-huh.
And they appear as style. But real style really comes out innately beyond your control. It's everyone's signature is different. You know, everyone's sensibilities is slightly different based on their genetics, based on their environment. All of these things come into play. And to try to put your finger on why is one style one way and another style this way, it's a moving target. It's not necessarily an important, from an artist's point of view, from a historian's or a collector's point of view, it's a topic of conversation because they can see the categorization of styles. Loose, tight, impressionistic, realism, you know, all of these things they can attach terminology to. But for an artist, it's not in your control to develop style. What I was talking about earlier is stumbling upon something called a signature style and then really having the courage because sales are good, the audience is growing based on that style, okay, from the
Right.
outside looking in. And the artist sort of is like, well, I'm doing just fine. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's generating a good livelihood. And so from that point of view, for an artist to settle on a certain signature style, it can be a double-edged sword. It can be a dangerous inhibitor from actually pushing their own internal envelope to actually growing their work, which is really more about an internal conversation they're trying to have, rather than finding a look or a style that they can market.
Okay.
Finding a style and thinking about marketing, I mean, I know that that's important, but I think it's really would be doing an artist, he would be doing himself a disservice because we only have this time to work. And so I don't know why cater to market, why not try to grow as an artist?
Yeah, you could definitely.
You always will find somebody that likes your work. You know, just keep
Right.
making the work and somebody will
That's
like
right.
it.
Yeah, and you only need a handful.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You only need a handful. But, you know, really what you're both saying and what I'm hearing is that there is, can be a danger that diminishes or undermines the sense of discovery, right? You go, oh, I found my style and I'm being financially successful, so I'm just going to do it over and over and over again. Well, your whole passion for your art goes through a change because you've eliminated a driving force, which for a long time was a sense of discovery, right? Which and I'm going to allude back to something we were talking about in the break, where there's a little 150-page book by Winston Churchill on painting. I forget the exact title, but you can probably buy the book on Amazon for $8. You know, but it's got some interesting commentary about painting. He was a Sunday painter, and he said that he hopes there's painting in heaven so he can spend the first million years of eternity trying to figure it out.
Right. That's a great quote.
And that takes me back to, I played a lot of scholastic golf in the 70s and 80s, and you would get better and better with coaching and playing and you know, working at it. And it seemed like the better you got, the farther away you were from scratch, because you could start going, oh, this is way harder than what I thought it was. And I'm so, you know, I'm better than I was before, but now I'm realizing how far I am from the truly great golfers, right?
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it equates to art, and it's one of the things I both love and hate about a plein air event, right? Because I get to see how my work sort of looks next to all the artists that I admire so much, but I also get to see all the great stuff that's in their work that I would love to have occurring in my work. And then you start to go, oh, you know, you start to get pulled directions that are not authentic. So that's a hard part of doing a lot of plein air events, is you can run the danger of getting pulled in directions that really aren't authentic.
Is there a stylish painter or paint style now? Like, I'm going to just beat the word to death. Style, like I'm thinking style.
Keep going,
Yes,
Tim.
yes.
Style, style, style.
Alex Konevsky started, his style is signature, and so many people knock off of his work.
Alex, who's that?
Alex Konevsky.
Konevsky.
Yeah.
Okay.
So many people knock off his work, and then it just becomes slick painting.
Yeah.
You know, it's impressive, it's skillful, but it's slick. He was the originator.
That's
When-
the paintings of the figures, but then he sort of scrapes paint
Yeah, he's a
through it.
Philadelphia painter. He's world renowned. He's
Yeah,
you
okay,
look him
okay.
up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
he's a fabulous figure painter, but then he develops a figure painting, which is really, really well done. And then he'll sort of take a scraping tool, and he'll scrape colors through it and into it,
Yeah.
you know, and
Well-
each painting he does is sort of like the same kind of conversation, as I was saying before, that has had before.
Right.
One thing he does, I mean, what I really admire about him is his boldness and his devil may care attitude. And if you look at, it's called somepaintings.com, he goes through the process of a painting, and he goes ahead and he'll have, this is a beautiful painting at every stage, but he'll wipe out figures, you know, he has no fear. And that's one of the things I admire. Plus he has the skill, but he's willing to devastate everything to try to make a better painting.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of artists who are doing some version
Yeah.
Yeah.
of that sort of technique,
Yeah.
and I think it does add quite a bit of interest to a painting, and yeah.
It does, but some of them are knockoffs, total knockoffs.
I took a couple of workshops years ago with a famous artist out west, and he was extremely well known in Jackson Hole. And when you walked in some of the galleries in Jackson Hole, there were all the knockoffs who had taken
Yeah,
those
yeah.
same workshops.
Yeah.
You know, and I asked that particular artist, should I name the guy? Does it matter?
Yes. This is
Scott L.
breaking news
Christensen.
right here.
Right.
What's his
It
name?
was Scott L. Christensen, who is, world renowned, really, really established, and a great teacher too. But I asked him about how he felt about so much work in the galleries that sort of looked and felt like knockoffs.
What
of
did he
his.
say?
He said that it doesn't really bother me because, I know they're going to find their own path, and this was just a launching point for them.
Yeah.
They're gonna depart from what they're doing. So he thinks that,
Yeah.
he was fine.
So,
with
well,
it.
that's one of the questions on here on the sheet is that how did you find your own path? I mean, you're saying it's the inner truth. I'm sure you're coming from somewhere in the same spectrum of that answer, Georganna, or
Ask the question again?
how did you find your own path in
Oh, my
terms
own
of
path?
not being style, but being,
Have
I-
you found your own path?
yeah, have you found it? Well, yeah, right.
Well,
I found a path.
Well, you know, I always, you know, I have this conversation with a lot of my students, you know, and I equate it to, listen, we all have our own jungle. You know, here's a machete. Hack away
I
your
like that.
path.
That's
You know,
great.
hack away at your path.
That's
I'm doing the same thing. I just might be a little further along in the jungle than you.
Right.
And we all have our own jungle.
I like
And the
it.
point is that each artist has to hack away, has to get in the trenches, has to do the work, has to do the experimentation, has to do the process of discovery, has to make the mistakes, has to fall down, has to have those fights and struggles and hurts in order for them to find their own path. And so when you say, have you found, you know, you found your path, I'm still hacking away in the jungle.
Your path
every
is
day.
behind you.
The path that I've got behind me is behind me. I'm still going forward, and there's a lot
Did
of
you
foliage.
used to knock off people before? You found your path?
I admire other works, and it's primarily dead artists, you know,
Right.
because I spend time in museums, and every time I go to a different city, I'm in the museums. I was just in France for 2.5 weeks and spent a lot of time in the museums. And I love seeing the originals of reproductions and books that I've admired for years. And one painting that has just knocked my socks off was a Lumette, which is a great painting of late 19th century, a family with lathes, you know, a family of workers being paid at the end of the day. The woman is breastfeeding. The grandfather looks like he's completely, you know, spent. The young son is there too. So the composition and the spirit and humanity in that painting was just something that inspires me. So when I see work, and I see a lot of it here in Easton, you know, other artists' work who've captured or bottled some sense of truth in that moment that they were there, sweating away in the jungle with their machete, hacking away at the struggle of trying to create some sense of authentic piece of truth that they're after, the light of the day, the cast of shadow, the moment in time. When I see an artist fighting the good fight to get to some true point of view that comes from them, their inner being, but it's based on an outward experience, that's what I admire. That's what I admire.
Georganna?
Well said.
as far as the path, I think when I was in art school, I had initially, I was very shy and, you know, tentative, and I wanted to paint perfectly. And I just watched the teachers. I connected with a couple of mentors, and one in particular, and he was very sensual with his materials. And it's about, you know, everything he said really stuck with me. And I think it's choosing who you want to listen to, or who speaks your language. I think it's being very sensitive to outside sources, and being very strong in what you believe, not what other people think you should be doing. And I think, you know, everybody, it's not any safer to take somebody else's path. You know, it's always going to be. But I think he helped me so much just by giving me the freedom to do what I do. And that's kind of, you know, and then starting the Plein Air, I just kind of dropped into it accidentally at an event. And that really helped me too, because it helped me maintain. I was a total studio painter. I wouldn't dare plein air paint, but I happened to get into an event, so I had to learn, try to figure something out. And I think that helped me get much stronger with my own aesthetic, because I'm with all these painters, fantastic painters, but I am not representational painter. And so it's made me firmer and stronger in my aesthetic, because it can stand up to these. It's just very different, you know?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So the path is just going to the studio every day, or outside, just painting, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, I really like that image of the jungle, and it does make total sense to me that in a large part, the path is behind you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
If you were to, recommend one book for somebody to read about art, what would it be? Would it be Winston Churchill? Don't you-
Maybe. I mean, I thought that was fun and humorous, and you could read it in one night. It's not a long book, and it's not a treatise on techniques and aesthetics. It's one person's viewpoint. But if we were to say, okay, would you recommend an instructional book?
Not instructional, just a book to
But
somebody.
I want to mention this book. It's there's a book by Groupie, Emil Groupie. It was the last one. I don't know the exact title. I think that it was had something to do with color. But the thing that made that book so good was, unlike his other books, this book was filled with anecdotes, especially from his childhood. And he talks about, and if for those of you who may not know, Emil Groupie is a Cape Ann school artist and was very prolific, and I think helped keep representational art on the map through the 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. And his father was also an artist. And my favorite story from this book, and there were a number of funny stories in this book, was he talks about how his father had just finished this painting for a big show up in New York, or down in New York or something, and he was playing with his crossbow in the house. I'm like, who's shooting a crossbow in the house? And he shot a hole in that painting.
Yay.
Right? And he says, my father locked me in the closet for about 15 hours so he would avoid killing me. But that I would recommend those kind of books,
Yeah.
because for me it brought an artist that I really enjoy
Into a human
and,
context.
and made it
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah,
So
I would say,
Garin book.
well, I mean, there's so many good
I
ones.
know, just
He
pick
wants
one.
one
There
book.
are
Pick
tons.
one.
There are
One book.
tons.
Just pick
I could go.
one.
I have a
One.
wonderful art library in my studio that I have
One.
a great collection
One.
of books. One.
One.
I would say the one that boils it down really well for me and sort of still rings true every time I pick it up is Robert Henri's The Art Spirit.
the art spirits.
Yeah.
Good book, yeah.
That's a good book.
Yeah.
Georganna.
I'd say Hans Hofmann's Search for the Real.
Oh,
Tiny
that's a
book.
good one. Yeah.
Right? See, you know all these names.
She
I
had
don't
that
know,
answer ready,
so
though.
that's
She had
great.
that
No, I didn't. I was just listening to you about Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And, I did when I was talking to him, yes.
Yeah.
I know I hate being put on the spot.
I'm going to have to get some of these names from you so I can.
My wife just got me a small little book. It's called Artist Theft.
Yeah.
How from one generation to the next, there's a learning process among artists. Taking pieces of one from another, reinventing it, jumbling it back up, reinventing it, the next generation, reinventing,
Right.
jumbling it back up,
So,
reacting against it, being radical, being conservative, all of those things from one generation, from one artist to the next.
here's
Sure.
a question
And the theme
for
of the
you.
book is steal everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
So, along those lines, how do you think an artist would develop if he worked in isolation and didn't have any artist friends, couldn't go online and look up any paintings?
That's an interesting question because I've known several artists that we don't really say in isolation. We say in vacuum. They work in
Okay,
a
yeah.
vacuous state
Yeah.
where they don't really allow any influences to come into their play. They really are singularly focused about their vision and their methodology, and there's a level of arrogance in it, and there's also a level of genius in it, in a
So,
sense.
do you think that would be a more direct path towards discovering your style?
Again,
Or is
couldn't
it different from person to
You're-
person? Some
I- you
people
know,
need all these outside
I
influences?
think it's intentional. I think every artist, it's intentional. There's, for me, my stuff, and there's also this word realism. You know, we call everything realism now, you know,
Right.
especially if it's a
I'm with you.
recognizable subject. But that is really diametrically opposed to the real historical and true sense of what the word realism was really used for. And realism really had to do with a period of art coming from Courbet, you know, out of the French Academy. And the realist painters were interested in painting not so much court figures and appealing to sort of classical subject matter, which you see prior to that, especially in the French Academy. The realists really wanted to paint their experience, their everyday lives.
Right.
And so that period of art, sort of late 1870s to 1910, 1920, there was a very concise period where artists were very interested. It went all the way from Courbet, and then you can look at George Bellows coming out of the New York School. But the point is that that arc of that discussion of art, and I was very drawn to a lot of that kind of art. But the more I am interested in realism, and I mean realism in the historical sense, not just completely blown away by the work when you see it. So there is that like singular point of view that is very almost egomaniacal in a sense. But when you see the work, it's just like, wow, that's really brilliant. That's really compelling, how brilliant it is, you know. But you know, they worked on it in sort of a narrow tunnel, a narrow definition of what they were after, you know.
Georganna, anything?
I would prefer not to work in a vacuum. Greatly prefer.
Me
I like to
neither.
have a lot of different stimulation.
I don't know if she worked in a vacuum or not. But, you know, I just wanted to comment on through the course of this panel, I was never really familiar with your work. but I-
Yeah,
So gatherings or parties, I kind of like to,
Well,
you know, like my father was a filmmaker, and he was,
Oh, no kidding.
he was a documentary filmmaker. And I like that aspect of, you know, being, you know, the journalism aspect of it.
Okay, yeah.
Of being, of documenting, you know, an honest portrayal, a faithful, kind of empathetic portrayal
Right,
of the
and
human
I think-
existence.
I think
really am
empathy's a good word
fascinated by
for
that
it.
kind of thing. So
and
I'm a perpetual, I mean, I'll stand in the street and I'll just watch
Well,
people.
you know, people watching is one thing. It's what you're really thinking about the people, you know, and what comes across from you is that.
Wrap this up with a jungle story of my own here in a second.
Are we in
Sort
the
of bring us
jungle,
back
Tim?
full round. Anybody who has any questions in the audience, we have a small audience here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Just raise your hand and we'll ask them. There's a lot of information here that you may want to have a question about. I'll give you a second to think about that. So a couple of years ago, I was listening to this story about, and it was in the jungle, and there was a tribe, and what had happened was that, you know, the tribes, they have to keep looking out further for their sustenance. They can't just stay in the one area. And well, the tribe went so far that they chopped down all the forests and they ended up in a town. And when they got there, they were like, "You mean there's meat hanging on that thing? I don't have to like go kill my meat anymore, and I don't have to." And they were like, they decided to stay.
Yeah.
Can you get through the forest and get to a place where you want to stay? For you guys, are there any of you three?
That's an interesting,
I have no idea.
you know, it's funny because when I grew, I think it's an extension of your early kind of childhood and your experiences when you were young. You know, I think that has a lot to do with, you know, your framework and your aspirations, you know. And I had a great benefit. I grew up in a very, you know, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-economic kind of community. You know, the New York City, the Upper West Side, when I grew up, you could literally see the strata of society in 4 blocks. You know, from Central Park West, you know, where they had the doorman buildings, to Amsterdam, to Broadway to the West End Avenue. Broadway was, you know, kind of a rough area. So literally in 4 blocks, you could see the full economic spectrum, in addition to the socio-cultural, racial makeup of the community. And so, in a way, that kind of experience has really informed my aspirations. Today you hear so much about them and us and this group, and we're all very tribal. But when you really look at it, there's a core of humanity that is throughout all of us. And if we can get past necessarily what's on the surface, get past the literal jungle. You move from one jungle, now these people live differently. If you can get past that, we're really all relatively the same in terms of our heart, in terms of our aspirations, in terms of our loves, in terms of our fears. We really carry pretty much the same makeup.
Right.
And that's what I'm...
So you're kind of there already.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Georganna, you're not going to...
I don't live in the jungle.
I meant it metaphorically.
I know that. I know that. That's sort of a strange...
It might not have worked. You can say, Tim, that's
Welcome
terrible.
to-
And
the jungle.
meat hanging on, I don't eat meat, so that
Right. But
wouldn't...
they're vegetables, too. But the other side
No,
of the
I'd
story
want, I'd
is...
want to be in the jungle, I think, if I had a choice.
Right, right.
The great big
Interesting.
mosquitoes, yep.
I look at painting as an extremely deep well, and the more passion and drive you want, the deeper you can go, and drawing up crystal clear water. I don't think I'll ever exhaust the well and arrive at a place where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm here.
I agree.
I just and my wife and I, we own a sailboat. I'm really a powerboat guy. I always own power boats, and then we finally bought a sailboat. And the difference between those two says it all. The powerboat, it's about the destination. The sailboat, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, painting is a journey. I'm really getting to know Georganna for the first time. You can bet I'll go look at her work and somehow, some way, she's figured out something I've not figured out yet, and I'll learn from that. Same thing with Garin. I'll go look a little deeper into his work because he's figured out stuff I haven't figured out, and that'll be part of the deep dive into that.
Plus, you're going to start being empathetic towards people.
and I'm going to start being I'm not devoid of
No,
empathy,
I really admire, the continual curiosity. Life
Yeah.
School. I think when we did that podcast some months ago, we titled it, Life School. It's in session every day for all of us.
Yeah.
There's always something to learn.
sorry to interrupt.
There's always
you're fine.
something to grow. There's always something to nurture. And I think if you look at things that way, the journey is really the golden mean, is the spot you want to be in.
Yeah.
It's not the end,
I interrupted him, so he
No,
wanted
I
to
think
continue
pretty much.
talking.
I
Okay.
think I pretty much said what I wanted to
Okay.
say.
Yeah, no, he got it. Well, we're going to title this Style Who Needs It. That'll be the name of this.
Yeah, who needs it?
Does anybody have any questions out in the audience? Anybody have anything for any of these folks? Feel free, please don't be shy. You can come up here and sit in this chair if you want to. Anybody have anything?
Yeah, it's cozy
Yes, ma'am.
up here.
Yes, ma'am. What was the title?
I think it's called Painting as a Pastime. Yeah.
Painting as a
It's a fun
Pastime.
read.
The
It's
first
just-
million years in heaven. Subtitle.
You don't want to
Yeah.
read my book?
What was your book, Georganna?
What's your book?
Search for the Real by Hans
Search for the
Hofmann.
That
Real.
sounds good. I like
Search
that.
for the
I've
Real.
read that book. That's a great
And then
book.
Garin, I think
The Art Spirit by Robert Henri.
or Artist Thieves or whatever it was called. Right?
Yeah,
Artist
steal everything.
Steal everything. Did you get it, ma'am? Anybody else have a question? Anybody over here? Thank you all for coming again. Hopefully this was a fun conversation to
Yeah.
Well, that was great, Tim.
eavesdrop in on. And again, 2022 Plein Air Easton here in Easton, Maryland. I think it's one of the best spots to be if you are an art lover, collector, novice. This is a great week to be in Easton, Maryland. We'll be here until Sunday at the Academy Art Museum inside the Armory. There'll be a quick draw on Saturday. There'll be a couple thousand people downtown. Please, if you're watching this and you can get here, come downtown. We would love to host you, and I think you will really enjoy it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks very
very
much.
much.
Thank you, Joe.